has the United Kingdom gone to war with Russia? Now, listen, I understand just to even say that sentence out loud, the natural reaction, the proper reaction is to, come on, dude, no one's going to do that in UK. I mean, they're not stupid. They're not, suicidal. But when you look at the ground of what's actually happened, it's a legitimate question. And listen, this is something that has significant ramifications, not just for the UK by itself, but for the entire Western world. And that includes the United States. And it definitely includes Ukraine. Now, we know Ukraine's at war, obviously, but in the 11th hour of this war, now closing in on 3 years, and now, of course, there's been a sea change in the United States with Donald Trump defeating Kamala Harris for the presidency. And so now less than 2 months, it's going to be President Trump again in there. And he ran on a campaign absolutely unequivocal about wanting to end the Russia-Ukraine war. He has been very vocal ever since then about saying he's going to seek a negotiated settlement at the earliest possible moment. So everyone in the West, everyone in the world for that matter, sees that the U.S. is signaling that the incoming administration is going to seek an end to the war. Why then are we seeing, and that includes the current U.S. administration, taking actions that could potentially escalate this, and in fact, actually already have? And now then the real question is, what is the UK going to do in relation to all these things that's happening? And there's been a lot. So to try and unpack some of this and make sense of it, we go to the smartest man in London, Ian Puddick, to try and figure this out. Ian, what in the heck is going on in the UK?
Well, the world has the world has gone mad. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. The levels of propaganda know no limits. All the stops have been put out to push the official narrative, and you can argue the rights and wrongs of the whole thing. I know we both share the same thing. This invasion should never have happened. End of story. But we are where we are, and it has. And there is a very, very specific agenda behind this, which people aren't aware of, because of the propaganda. And propaganda works. Otherwise, they wouldn't deploy propaganda if it wasn't effective, and it is. So yeah, we are, in my mind, at war with Russia. Do I believe that there's going to be World War III and there's going to be nuclear war? No, I don't. But by our hostile behavior, if Russia were firing the equivalent of their, well, not the equivalent, they've got better missiles, haven't they? If they were firing their hypersonic missiles at the UK, what would be the UK response? It's a rhetorical question. I don't need to state it. We both know the answer.
Well, I say you know it's not going to go to the extreme, but listen, I got to say that based on where it's gone here, and of course I'm putting the U.S. in the same category with the extraordinarily unwise risks that we're taking by allowing the use of long-range weapon systems. And by the way, that includes both the ATACMS from the U.S. and the Storm Shadow from the UK, because the U.S. is actually very involved in the Storm Shadow operation with the UK. So we're double guilty on that regard here. But there is no military reason why you would do this. There's no possibility for the Ukraine side to win. There's no chance that the insertion of these missiles is going to change the dynamics on the ground. But it can very much, and actually already has, heightened the risk that this thing escalates beyond. So if we're taking this action that has no military upside, then who's to say that we're not going to keep on making foolish decisions? You seem to be more confident than I am. Tell me some reason why I should change my mind.
Well, I mean, it's about perspective, I guess. So when you say, what's to stop us to keep deliberately making these stupid decisions, you're absolutely right. I can tell you now, we will keep making these stupid decisions. But then there's the question, for how long? And the question is, I think we've got a couple of months until Biden's out of office. So we're going to be playing the stupid game of pushing or poking the bear, firing missiles, doing whatever we need to do for as long as Biden's in. It's as simple as that. And, when I say we, the royal we, the Brits, will take their lead from their parents in the US. I mean, who would follow sleepy old Joe Biden? I mean, who would do that? We would. It's unbelievable, but we are. And that's where we are.
Yeah, and for those who may not have seen, let me show you where we are in terms of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who said this earlier today on British radio.
Thousands of jobs in defence in our part of the world, including Abbey Wood at Filton. Storm Shadow missiles are made there. The government, your government, has not confirmed or denied that they've been used on Russian territory. But there are a lot of people in defence and a lot of people very worried about what's going on right now in Ukraine. Are we at war?
No, we're not at war, but Ukraine certainly is, because Ukraine has been invaded by Russia, and that war has now been going on for just over 1,000 days. That's 1,000 days of aggression from Russia and 1,000 days of sacrifice for Ukraine. And that is why we've said consistently that we stand by Ukraine. We cannot allow Putin to win this war.
And let me just show you, even before we get into the specifics of what he said there. He says, no, of course, we're not at war with Russia. But the Russian ambassador to the UK has a very different viewpoint.
So are you saying now that Britain is directly involved in this war?
Absolutely. Britain and UK is now directly involved in this war, because this fighting cannot happen without without NATO staff.
Listen, I mean, factually, he's accurate there. The Storm Shadow missiles and the ATACMS missiles cannot be independently operated by Ukraine, like say the Challenger tanks or whatever else. So that is technically accurate here. And the Russians have basically said, or not basically, they have directly said that if Putin, you may recall back in September, I think we've talked about this with you previously, he said that if these weapons are used, we will consider that as the direct participation of the West in the war, and then we will take appropriate countermeasures. Now, we've already seen one countermeasure actually seen two, is that in response to this, Russia has officially lowered the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons, and then a day ago fired a intermediate range ballistic missile that travels at Mach 10 or higher into a tank with a conventional warhead into Dnipro in the middle of Ukraine, as a very unambiguous, clear warning that the next missile could be outfitted with a nuclear warhead if necessary. Is that going to get the attention of the West?
No. I think, so I'll give you a couple of examples. So Sandhurst is the British Army's training academy, if you want to call it that, and they have people from all over the world that come there to train. And one of the trainers there was saying to me that the message obviously came down from high. This is just a couple of weeks ago. The message came down from the gods above, saying that we really need to step it up and just put pressure on the soldiers, the troops, and just let you know that we are really now training for war. So the trainer put that message out to these soldiers, and one of the soldiers, like being at school, put his hand up and said, "But we're meant to be doing that every day anyway. That's our job." It was absolutely bang on. In other words, oh, no, now it's becoming real. Well, it's been real for a very long time, but we just haven't taken it seriously. And I think that to all intents and purposes, the Foreign Office, the British Ministry of Defence, the British state effectively knows how badly they've painted Putin, and the levels of propaganda know no limits, is that he's not going to be setting off nukes. So they can push him and look tough and really robust, and we'll stand up to the bear and we're ready, we're really hard, and if he comes, we're there, and it all sounds great and very British, but it's nonsense. It's just utter nonsense. The Ministry of Defence is out of weapons. The biggest store in the UK, we stayed there not too long ago. The biggest military arms store in Telford is depleted. Hang on, they're not my words. They're the words of the people working there. We are depleted. So we're going to take on Russia. We're ready to fight Russia. With what? With what? It's just nonsense. I mean, in the Daily Telegraph just a couple of days ago, and then repeated yesterday, headlines: Russia is on the verge of collapse. I mean, it's insane. But and these are intelligent people, but it's propaganda. and it's not true. It's just simply not true.
Okay, so
but people believe that.
When you use propaganda, any nation, and what nation doesn't use propaganda to some degree?
There's Russian propaganda. It works.
Russian
propaganda everywhere,
Ukraine propaganda, American propaganda, everybody, because they want to, mold the message to get something good for their side. But the purpose is to have some positive outcome for your side. Now, help me understand, what is the positive outcome the British seek to attain when your Prime Minister Keir Starmer said this at the G20 summit?
I'm at the G20 with one message, which is that we must double down on our support for Ukraine. Tomorrow is day 1,000 of the conflict. That's 1,000 days of aggression from Russia and 1,000 days of sacrifice from Ukraine. So that is my clear message here. It's number one on my agenda.
Okay, double down? Okay, listen, a real quick, just, summary here. 2023, the Ukraine side goes on this massive offensive that they spent a half a year preparing for. The U.S. and the West and the UK gave them everything imaginable, every kind of weapon system or artillery, ammunition, tanks, all that kind of stuff. They broke their teeth on the first round. They didn't even get past the first line of Russian defense. And then ever since that time, from November of last year all the way through to this day, Russia has been on an offensive. They are sweeping across in there. Why, when Trump is coming in less than 2 months now, unambiguously, clear as crystal, saying, I'm going to have a negotiated settlement, we are not going to continue this war, does Keir Starmer want to double down?
Great. So it's a great question. I mean, I think 2 points. I'll address that in two ways. So within the Foreign Office and the Ministry of Defence, when I say us Brits, firing Storm Shadow long-range missiles into Russia is perceived as a defensive measure. I mean, it's like me punching you in the face. And well, there could be an argument if you were going to attack me and I struck first to defend myself. But, Russia's not attacking Britain. You can say whatever you want. You can say how evil, terrible, bad Putin is. They are not attacking Britain. The propaganda would suggest that they are, by the way, but that is just propaganda. The guys at the MOD don't believe that Russia's going to attack Britain. I can tell you that unequivocally. So it's just nonsense. It's political posturing. And then the other narrative that the Foreign Office are trying to spin, and it's pathetic, is that us and the Ukrainians, along with our American partners, are improving the negotiating position that's coming in within 2 months. So obviously Trump's going to sit down with these people and sort it out and bring it to an end. And how do you bring something to an end? It's through diplomacy and a negotiation. And we've never had diplomacy, never. We've gone straight to war because it's in our interest to weaken Russia, because we want, I've discussed previously with the NATO objectives of taking on China in previous podcasts. But there is a bigger picture to all of this, and we need a weaker Russia so that they can't support China with an oncoming war. We want to defeat Russia and weaken Russia so that we can get rid of the terrible, evil, demonic Putin and put in a Western friendly leader so that we can have brilliant relations with Russia, and then we can work with them to take that oil and gold and the precious metals and minerals that they are so abundantly rich in. That's ours. You've heard Lindsey Graham say it. He's admitted that is ours. It's insane. Who are we to take their oil and gas and minerals? It's just another world. It's just another world.
When the owner of all that gold and oil and everything, minerals, etc., has the largest nuclear stockpile in the world, the answer is no one is going to do anything for anybody. But listen, I guess from a certain perspective, you can say that it's at least, in terms of my actual question is, what is the propaganda victory for the UK side? I guess you can say, all right, if they think that those things are going to happen, then I guess maybe they can think that somehow it's going to happen, because you got to have the people behind you to be able to go after these. Because if it's exposed that the objectives are absolutely impossible to attain, then the people won't be supportive of it. So I guess hence the need for propaganda. Is that close to what you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we share a friend with former British diplomat. We've been out for a meal together, Ian Proud. You know,
Good man.
you know, yeah, fantastic guy, fantastic guy. So you know, Britain has like anybody else, we have an embassy in Russia. So do the Brits engage with the Russians and talk to the Russians and have diplomacy? We have zero. We have zero. I mean, how? What's the point of the embassy? What's the point of the staff? It's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Do you know how Britain gets information on Russia and what's happening in the political circles? We have to defer and ask the French and the Germans, who still have open channels of communication with the Russians. We don't have that. So we get our information secondhand from the French and the Germans. And when you walk into the Foreign Office, there's a huge sign that says Britain leads the way around the world in diplomacy. And we don't. We may have done once, but we certainly don't anymore. I'm just trying to think of Winston Churchill. What did Winston Churchill say? Jaw, in other words, talking. Jaw is better than war. Well, we've lost that. We just go straight to the war because we're like Scrappy Doo, you know, in Scooby Doo. You know, we're like the little pup that's, you know, he's got his big hand. He's going to put them up. You know, we're ready to fight anyone. We're just.
So what is Ian
insane.
Proud? But Ian Proud, for those who may not know, used to work in the UK embassy in Moscow, so he has a lot of experience there. What is he telling you about how he views the state of things?
Well, he's very vocal on Twitter, and he's writing articles about what's really going on, and not so much just what's really going on, how we've arrived in the position we're in today because of the lack of communication with the Russians. As I said, you know, I get called a Putin puppet and all this kind of stuff. I'm not pro-Putin. I'm not pro the war. Should he have invaded? Absolutely not. The difference is I understand why he invaded. I understand what happened or what's been happening around the world with the British government and certainly the Americans to foment a situation where Putin invaded. Should he have invaded? Of course he shouldn't have. But we know why. I don't agree with it, but you know, he did. And we are where we are now. And when we get to a negotiation, you know, what's the, you know, I run a business, you know, what's the golden rule of any negotiation? It doesn't matter what you sell or what you're involved in. The golden rule of any negotiation, the first rule, is to understand the negotiation and position yourself in the best position that you can be in to negotiate. So if you're going into a negotiation and it just so happens that the odds are stacked against you because of all different reasons, well, try and put yourself in the best position. Our solution to that is try and bomb Russia more to improve it, which is stupid. Absolutely stupid.
Now, so obviously that in the United States, we've got a mirror problem with this, or an equivalent problem with the current administration taking all these actions to include adding in landmines that we are banned in most of the rest of the world, inserting those into, you know, at the 11th hour in here. And then we could talk about that separately. But obviously we have a similar problem on this side of doing things that make no sense militarily or diplomatically that will not put us in a better position. But fortunately, all the news is not bad. Of course, on the U.S. side, we know that President Trump is coming in and he will change his mindset then. But even on the U.K. side, there is apparently some people, more than just you, who actually see things the way they really are. Here is Nigel Farage yesterday saying, hey, what's going on with all this?
Well, in the last few days, British long-range Storm Shadow missiles have been fired fairly deep into Russia. The same has happened with American missiles. This is the first time in 1,000 days that this has happened. Keir Starmer at the G20 today saying it's the right thing to do because it puts Ukraine in the strongest possible position to win. Now, it was interesting in Westminster today, listening to the Labour government, the Conservative opposition, the Liberal Democrats. Everybody still seems to think that if we give Ukraine enough weaponry, that somehow they're going to win this war. And yet, when I get outside of Westminster and talk to ordinary folk, I've not met anybody in the last month who thinks Ukraine is ever going to win. And I do wonder, right at this time, whether it's the wise thing to do.
Well, I think we know the answer to the last question there, sir. But I just wonder if some of your experience. I know that you and I have talked quite a bit over the last number of months, and that you say in some of your travels in London that most of the normal people do think something closer to what Mr. Farage there mentioned, that if we just give them enough stuff, they can change it.
Absolutely.
But do you have any experience outside? Because he specified once he gets outside of Westminster that the British people think something different. Have you had any experience with that?
I think they largely believe certainly largely people believe the propaganda because they're getting it from multiple sources. So they're getting it from all of the mainstream media. I mean, the BBC's cheerleaded itself for forever as independent journalists, questioning all authority. So BBC headlines that Russia's on the verge of collapse, and the soldiers, and this, I'm not making this up, the soldiers, the Russian soldiers are having to use shovels because they're out of guns. I mean, it's just pathetic. It's just pathetic, and it's just completely not true. But why would they do that? Because it works. But just to go back to what you said just before that clip, you mentioned about the landmines. I tweeted back in 2022, special forces soldiers that on the ground in Ukraine that I personally know delivered landmines back then, which is completely illegal against all the various conventions, completely illegal American landmines and anti-personnel mines, and they smuggled them into Ukraine, authorized by Boris Johnson. The Prime Minister, obviously, he would just deny that and say, everyone's made it all up and we're all lunatics and stuff like that. But that's the British state for you.
And what is the purpose of that? I mean,
desperation.
Well, I mean, I guess that's just what it is. But is there any among the people? Because I know that you talk to a number of people at various points of the British government or military installations. Are there at least some people who say, "Hey, this doesn't make a lot of sense because
loads.
Propaganda, it's going to be bad for the UK."
Right. So absolutely loads and loads. People in NATO, no, loads. Here's the problem though. So when you go above lieutenant colonel and you get into brigadiers, major generals, and so forth, it's almost a political appointment. So there's no discussions there about questioning the official narrative. Russia's out to get us. We've got to defend Great Britain, and they toe the line. I think you had an experience of that when you came over to London, to Westminster with Matt Hoe, and you found the former admiral in a debate. I'm sure I remember you saying that you weren't expecting him to question the official narrative, but he did. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Because I thought he was actually going to take the other position.
Of course, I would have put money on that.
But he was not, and I had hoped at the time, because that's been, what was that, back in May, I think. I had hoped that there would be that would represent a switch or a move, and it seems to have evaporated if it existed back at that time. But listen, this goes beyond the U.S. and the UK, because you mentioned NATO. Well, this is really a head scratcher to me. Here is the new Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, talking about the Ukraine-Russia war.
Today marks 1,000 days of the full Russian onslaught, the unprovoked full Russian onslaught on Ukraine. So today we'll discuss how we can help Ukraine to prevail. That means more aid, more money, and we have to make available to them, particularly now that the North Koreans have come on board. And we know that China is helping Russia with the war effort. We know that Iran is supporting Russia with the war effort. And as we also know, Putin has to pay for this. For example, with missile technology going into North Korea, which then is a direct threat. It poses a direct threat not only to us, but also to South Korea, to Japan, and even to the US mainland. So we have to make sure that Putin will not get his way, that Ukraine will prevail in this fight, and today that will be on the agenda.
He really there exemplifies what Mr. Farage had said, that he found puzzling, that people still think if you just give them enough stuff, they can win. He literally said that we have to keep giving more of this ammunition, more of these weapons, so that they can prevail. And he said it twice during that time, that yes, Ukraine can prevail and we must not let Russia win. And okay, get it. I get it. That's your objective and your isolated preference. You'd like to see Russia pay for it, as he said there. But if you don't have the capacity, and they do have the capacity to prevent that outcome, then at some point, there has to be a little bit of ration self-interest, if nothing else. Just say, all right, we can't keep going down with the propaganda, because that is as propaganda as it gets. And you can't keep going down that path, or it's going to self-harm you. Where is that point?
I don't know. I don't know is the answer. I'll try and give you something a bit more definitive. But just going back to what you were just saying about the admiral who sits in the House of Lords, and the name just has escaped me. And you were saying you and Matt Ho were both really surprised at what he had to say. Well, okay, imagine that he was still the admiral and hadn't retired. He would not have said those things. He would have towed the government line, because it's a political position, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But coming back to the end game, we've got this sort of 2 month, slightly less than 2 months window for Biden to go. And he's just disrespected the American people horrendously. I mean, he lost big time on a mandate that Trump won to stop the war. So he's deliberately escalating the war in this short period of time that he's got. One, to mess things up for Trump, I have no doubt. And they all make money out of the war machine anyway, don't they? All these people. It's just outrageous. I mean, we have different systems over here. So are all the generals getting rich and stuff? Probably not. No, it's not like America. It's very, very different. But they're political decisions. And the generals, the people that you see on TV now advocating war, have to, because it's part of their job. I do think that they are believers. I don't think naively that they're not. I do absolutely think they're believers. But back in that clip that you just showed with the new NATO, the NATO boss, as they always say, unprovoked. Unprovoked. Yeah. This is an unprovoked. It's a deliberate word, because we all understand what it means. It's unequivocal. It's unprovoked. Putin woke up one morning, had nothing better to do, right, and he decided to invade another sovereign country. Why? Because he's crazy, mad, bad, and he could. It's not true.
Yeah,
it's not true.
Yeah, and when you say it like that, even people who are believers should kind of hesitate and go, "Wait, that actually doesn't make any sense at all."
No, it doesn't make any sense at all. Right. People don't know about Victoria Nuland and the coup, and her deliberately choosing an unelected leader and deposing an elected leader. They don't know about in 2014 about the townhouse. Is it called the trade union building, where they burnt alive 40 peaceful protesters.
Yep. Nobody knows about that in the West.
People don't know about that. People don't know what's gone on, because it's information control. On Tuesday, I spent a day with one of our business customers, extremely wealthy, and I mean extremely wealthy. And we had this conversation, and I played him some clips on stuff, and he just said, "I didn't know that." I said, "No, that's what I'm showing you. You would never know this. You'll never see it on the BBC. You'll never see it on any mainstream media. And anybody that says it to you, you would disregard as a bit of a nutter, really, because it's it's there. It's there, and obviously thanks to people like yourself for trying to share the truth and question the reality of what's going on, because by questioning what's going on, understanding it, discussing and debating it, we sort of have some understanding. But there's not enough of it, I'm afraid.
There's not. And speaking of the truth and what actually matters in the reality, one of the hallmarks of our channel here that Gary and I have started is always, we talk about ground truth reality. What's actually happening on the ground matters more than anything else, because if you can have all these high and lofty ideals, but if they can't be translated into reality on the ground, you got to change the lofty ideals, because they always trump everything. So I want to shift a little bit to that side of the equation here, because we kind of have lost sight of this. I think that both Biden and Keir Starmer have both lost sight of the impact and the implications for the Ukrainian people. by continuing to traffic in this insanity and this mental process that just this is the world we want to exist. We're losing sight of what's happening on the ground, and I'm talking about on the base level here. Here is a report from one of the few that does come out in mainstream media. This is from Germany, Deutsche Welle, where they're talking about the impact on the men who have to do the fighting.
Cases of absence without leave have tripled so far this year. In August, the Ukrainian parliament decriminalized the offense for first-time offenders if they return to fight. That includes Alexander. Now he's trying to join the 47th Brigade, which is actively reaching out to deserters, telling them it's okay to make mistakes and that the brigade would welcome them back. Lawyer Oksana de Hoter often represents such runaway soldiers. She says she's heard it all. Men who knew they were being sent to their deaths, men who had breakdowns, men who simply wanted to go home after 2 years on the front.
It is difficult to go into battle against a tank or artillery when you realize that you have no artillery support behind you. When you realize that you have 1 grenade and 2 bullet magazines, this is suicide.
And that is the painful reality of it, is that it is, in many cases, it is just suicide. They have lost, no one knows the real number, and it's greatly disputed, but it is a massive number on the Ukraine side. And even though the British
over 700,000.
That's what the British claim for the Russian side.
Yeah,
actually,
it's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah,
it's not true. It's not true.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But you know what? Even if it were absolutely precisely accurate, that still doesn't matter, because the number on the other side is equivalent or almost certainly higher. And the Russians have millions more men to pour into that, and the Ukraine side doesn't. So they will never undergo that. And so the fabric of their country is literally being ripped to shreds. The country is Russia had the latest round just a couple of days ago, where they're continuing to knock out the ability to create energy and heat, even for their country, as they get now into the coldest part of the winter. So they're not able to do economic activity. Millions of people have fled, never to return. The people that they're going to need after the war to rebuild are being shoveled into this slaughter on a daily basis. And of course, they continue to lose territory at a rapid pace. At what point does anybody finally put a stop to this?
There's no political will at all for that to happen. I mean, in that little news clip, I mean, I've seen the videos where they're shooting deserters. They're shot. Well, they can't shoot deserters now. Why? Is it because they've become very moral and they've trying to be understanding and understand that, you know, people's mental health and all that? No, I don't think they give a monkeys, to be honest with you. I tell you what, they don't have enough people. They're running out of people. A whole generation plus are dead. You know, at the very beginning of the Ukraine war, they had this massive army that's been trained for 20 years by NATO, to NATO standards, NATO equipment, untold money, and they're all dead. They're all dead. And if you watch the videos online, you'll never see it on you'll never see it on the BBC, you'll never see it on mainstream news. They have vans just pulling up at bus stops, following able-bodied young men, and literally gangs of men pulling them into vans. And then there's, you know, they've got a brief bit of training, and they're sent to the front line to die. And what is so sad? I mean, these poor people, these poor Ukrainian people. What is so sad is, as George Galloway says, and he's absolutely spot on, is Britain is happy to fight Russia to the last drop of Ukrainian blood. We'll do anything we can, and as long as the Ukrainians are dying for us, we will support it. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting.
Gary, do you have those two full screens I was talking about? One with a call out. I didn't ask you about it before. Is that something you have handy that you can pull up there? Okay, don't have that. It's too bad. You know what? I may have it on my own screen. Hang on just 1 second here. Yeah, let me see if I can pull this up on the screen here, because it's really important. It kind of gets to what you said about what's the word I'm looking for? The propaganda. I can't make it show up here. I'm gonna not be able to. There was an article in the Huffington Post today that said the quality of Putin's army radically different after 1,000 days of war. The UK said, and here's some interesting things. According to the Ministry of Defense, Russia's attempt to create a modern professional force has been derailed by the last 1,000 days of war. Russian land forces are radically different to the force that invaded Ukraine, and that they have now lost more than 700,000 troops, drastically undermining Russia's force quality. They get minimal training. Russia has lost at least 3,500 main battle tanks and 7,500 armored personnel carriers, they say. And then here's the kicker. It gets to the very last point. It says, however, despite the cost imposed on its land forces, Russian territorial advances in Ukraine have accelerated through 2024. And one has to wonder, oh, yeah, okay, great, he found it there. You see that last part there. How is it that we can say, yes, there are all these horrible things, and then they're accelerating their territory? What is going on with the British people in this?
It's just too ridiculous to make up.
And did you see this here's from the New York Times here, and you see this escalating this show. This is up through October, where the land was continuing to fall in ever increasing volumes. And I'm sure that the November numbers, when they come in here in a few days, it's going to be another escalation above that. And then we got to say, man, what in the world is going on? It's graphically right there. Ian, how long can the propaganda go? I know that sounds like a broken record here.
2 months. 2 months. 2 months. It's just got to last 2 more months.
But let me ask you this question from the British perspective, from the British people, and I maybe you answered this question already, and that maybe they don't know. Do they not know that these are just being chewed to pieces in Ukraine, and the men are going through all this psychological damage that's being done?
No, and I don't think they care. No. It's a really, So let's just hypothetically say Putin woke up one morning and, because he's bad, crazy, and all that kind of stuff, invaded another country. We would all support that. It's a terrible thing to do. It's clearly the wrong thing to do. It's completely unacceptable on the world political stage, and something needs to be done. And most right-minded or like-minded people would say we need to do something to stop him. It's not an unreasonable thing to say. I know we both know that that's not true and that's not what happened, but that's what most people believe. And because of that, they're complacent, and they are bombarded with that message from every direction. So therefore, it's just a normalized belief now. It's been on for 2 years. I mean, so, I've said this before on previous podcasts. Back in 2022, 10,000 at a time, we were bringing Ukrainian men and women into the UK, into Wiltshire, and they would be trained by British soldiers to go back and fight. And literally hundreds, so there'd be groups of 10,000, and hundreds would just flee, literally just run off into the British countryside and just disappear. Not reported, obviously, because it's not politically, it doesn't work politically with the narratives that we're told. But that's been happening, but nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's the saddest thing. And you said, how long is this going to go on for? The answer is 2 months. Because
it could even come quicker than that for a different reason. So if the British people are not going to be moved, maybe because they're not allowed to see the suffering of the Ukrainian people and the disintegration, the deterioration of its armed forces, maybe they'll be able to do something when they see that Putin apparently has had his stomach full and he's tired of taking this stuff. So when the United States first announced that the long-range weapons would be permitted to be used, then Keir Starmer approved them shortly thereafter, and then almost right away Zelensky uses them. Apparently the first ATACMS that went in were all shot down. They didn't hit their targets. The Storm Shadow, apparently we now know from just the last 12 or 14 hours, actually some of them did get through. And in fact, Putin admitted yesterday that they killed some Russians in the Kursk area, and presumably also a North Korean general was wounded in action. But he made clear yesterday that his patience has near come to an end. And here's what he said specifically in regard to why he views we're in this situation.
I'm talking about what happened in the wake of long-range Western weapons being used in the special military operations zone. As a result of the escalation, the United States and their NATO allies said that they give their permission to use long-range weapons against targets inside Russia. Experts know fully well, and the Russian side has underscored this time and again, that using such weapons without the direct involvement of military operators from manufacturing countries is impossible.
So he unequivocally said what you and I know. We've already talked about that they're not possible. So it is the direct participation, like his ambassador to the UK said on Sky News a couple of days ago. But now then, he has not just said he's going to do something. Now he's actually taken two actions. Number one, he has lowered officially now the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. And he has fired an intermediate range ballistic missile, hypersonic, Mach 10. It's extraordinary. I think up to 13,000 miles per hour, something like that, on Dnipro inside Ukraine with non-nuclear warheads. But we know that missile, the RS-26, can be equipped with nuclear-tipped multiple maneuverable warheads that come in, and we don't have any air defenses to stop them. Putin pointed that out.
Nothing can.
I know we don't. No. So is that possibly going to get the attention of anybody in the West? And actually, let me show you one more piece here. Putin has said that not only is this possible, he directly said, I may be coming for you.
The further course of action will be determined based on the threats to the security of the Russian Federation. We believe that we have the right to use our weapons against military facilities of countries who allow their weapons to be used against ours. And in case of an escalation, we will act as decisively in a mirror fashion.
So does that get anyone's attention in the UK? Did they finally say, all right, there is a limit to how far we can go, even with propaganda, because it can harm us if we keep going?
So the British media have reported what you've just shown as Putin threatening us, which buys into the narrative how evil, wicked and bad he is, that we have to stop this bad, evil monster because he's coming for us. Don't believe us? You heard him say it. Because the narratives are all skewed. And they're obviously skewed in our state's favour because of how they want us to think and believe and behave. I mean, I tweeted out in the beginning of October, there are between 12 and 20 Storm Shadows in the various warehouses in Poland and inside Ukraine and in my mind's just gone blank. So there's between 12 and 20, and I think they've fired 12. And there will be more on their way. But it's just this short window of time that everyone has to go through, and they're just going to escalate because there will not be nuclear war. But
you're talking about, I don't know the total number of Storm Shadow missiles, but I heard from a very reliable source this morning that's very well connected with the U.S. government sources, said that there are about 100 ATACMS missiles in theater, 100 that are available. There's a total of maybe somewhere around 2,000 in our inventory total. By means of comparison, on the 17th of September, Russia fired 120 long-range missiles throughout the Ukrainian countryside, and it had an impact. It blew up a bunch of stuff. It caused them a lot of trouble, but it obviously didn't change anything in the war because that's been going on for 2 full years of this kind of bombardment. If we fired every ATACMS missile, every Storm Shadow missile that's in theater tomorrow, it's not going to have any impact on the war. But if Putin has said, now you've already killed some Russians with one of these, and if we get any more, we're going to respond in a similar fashion in your country. Does no one take that seriously?
No. I mean, within the MOD, within the ranks of the MOD, what they think that Putin will do next is that they will target what they call NATO trainers, which is not non-Ukrainian soldiers, which is basically American, British, and I mean loads of British soldiers have been killed. Swedish, Poles have lost loads of people out there. The numbers are all completely classified. I hear different things from different people. So I don't know is the answer, but I know British soldiers have died. I know Swedes have died. Loads of Polish soldiers have died. I mean, at some point these numbers will come out, but for the purposes of propaganda, we're winning. I mean, the head of MI6 only said, I think 5 months ago, that that Ukraine has taken more land back than Russia had taken initially. So Ukraine has actually expanded and got more land than Russia had actually taken in the war. It's the head of MI6. He said it on Sky News. I mean, you know, I run a small plumbing company and a gin distillery, a whiskey distillery. So you could say, what the hell do you know? The head of MI6 knows. It's a very valid position. Couldn't argue against that. No, it's a fair position. But it's all about information control. He knows what's really going on, but it's his job, in this case, to form the company policy, which is British government's policy. We're supporting America, following America's lead, and we are at war with Russia. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's what we did.
Here's what worries me. It's one thing about words, but here's on Military Summary Channel this morning, one of the best sources out there for daily updates on what's actually happening on the ground. Talked about something about the British today and about something some of their generals went to the Ukraine to talk to make some public statements, and well, just let this speak for itself.
The UK officials came to Kiev today, according to information we have. For example, the United Kingdom army is ready. If British army was asked to fight tonight, it would fight tonight, and I don't think anybody in this room should be under any illusion that if Russians invaded Eastern Europe tonight, then we'd meet them in that fight. So, you know, we have a lot of statements that United Kingdom is preparing itself to fight with Russians. It's very difficult to understand how it's going to happen, but for example,
that's good enough right there. That's far enough. But is he right? Is the British army ready to fight the Russian army tonight?
No. As I've previously said, you know, the military stores are depleted. You know, are British soldiers trained, armed, and ready? Yeah, that would be true. But trained and ready with what? You know, I'm not a military man whatsoever. You are, and I defer to you on this. But you know, to go into battle, you need a whole logistical theatre behind you to support you guys to make it work. Without it, it just doesn't work, and we don't have that.
Well, and plus the British Army. I mean, you mentioned earlier that they're short on a lot of critical things that you need to fight a war.
That's my point. That's my point. We just don't have enough. So all of that additional support, it's just not there. British Army is ready to fight. I'm just reading the headline, and it's just
and you know,
it sounds good.
Listen,
it sounds good.
I've fought in coalition warfare, in the large tank battles in Desert Storm in the 1990s against Iraq. There was, you know, a lot of different nations that were fighting together with us there. I've actually done a lot of missions throughout the other part of my military, even with the British. And anytime you're talking, especially like I can say the most recent one, I guess, was the 2003 war against Iraq that the U.S. fought. It takes months to prepare before you actually engage in that. And I'm talking some major buildup, calling up reserves, getting all kinds of stockpiles, ramming up your industrial capacity, et cetera. None of that's been done. It's certainly not in the United States, and I have not seen any in Britain. So I'm not sure by what measure they're claiming that they're ready to fight, quote, tonight.
No, it's just we're minutes away. I know it's 2 months, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, we're really close to the end, and we've got to sound like we're, you know, it's like a boxing match. You know, as you walk to the ring, you're still talking. We're in the final moments, and we just got to keep the stiff upper lip, talk tough, be robust, stand up to the evil enemy. You know, the right is on our side. You know, all this kind of stuff. How could we stop that now? It would all collapse. So we just have to keep it up for that period of time. I know I keep repeating myself saying that, but there isn't an alternative.
So let me ask you this: in the last few minutes we have here, what do you think the British will do once Trump? And this is a big assumption that we don't escalate into war right there. And I am not as confident as you are that we will be able to. But let's just say, for the moment, sense of argument, that we do. What will the British do after making all of these kinds of aggressive comments when Donald Trump is inaugurated on January the 20th, and it's like a 45-degree change in what the U.S. is doing? What will the British say then?
Great, yeah, it's a brilliant question. It's a killer question. I don't have a magic wand answer, I'm afraid. Can I just tell you what we will do? We will toe the company line and just defer that, pieces because of our robust stand, and we've stood up to the aggressor Putin. We've now got some kind of outcome, and it will prove that we've been vindicated by our aggressive stand, by standing up to Putin, being consistent for all this time. That has got us to a peace settlement, and it'll just be spun. I mean, that's not true, but that's just how it'll be perceived. That's what I think.
Well, that would be consistent with a lot of the behaviors, but man, I just got to tell you, I don't know that the spin's going to work. And at some point, American people and British people, even though they're given this onslaught of the propaganda you're talking about, when they see the net outcome is definitely not a positive thing for the Ukraine side, and that spin otherwise, they may just stop believing this stuff. But I guess we'll have to wait and see how that works out. And I pray to God we get to a chance, without expanding the war, to find out the answer to that question.
I think so. I mean, look at Germany. Germany's on its knees. Britain's not in great shape anyway, but we are weakened as a result of this war that we've created. So we just project that nonsense on Russia, and we're strong and they are weak. So House of Cards, it's all going to come tumbling down, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be. That's what historically has happened under these certain conditions. But I guess we'll have to bide our time and see what happens over the next couple of months, and just, like I said, pray that everything works out without making it even worse, because we're already going to have to deal with the consequences of our last 3 years worth. Let's just not add to it. But listen, thanks so much for coming on, Ian. Always a pleasure to get to talk to you.
Thank you.
And always a pleasure to have you guys with us too. Thank you very much for watching today. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't already. We really value you. And by the way, we're going to, speaking of some of these Russian missiles that have been fought, don't want to miss this. Professor Ted Postel from MIT is going to be on the show this afternoon. You've seen him talk about a lot of stuff about some of the missiles that have been fired in the Middle East. He's going to give us some very interesting analytics to what's actually happening and what these missiles do represent, things that you're not hearing on any mainstream news media. So tune in this afternoon for Ted Postel, and we will see you then on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.